Hi people, it's me Anja, my pronouns are she and her, and welcome back to my channel for my January TBR for 2026. Since the majority of the books that I tend to read are new releases, essentially, these are my most anticipated new releases that will be coming out in January 2026. I just wanted to quickly explain that since I didn't do monthly TBRs every month last year, but I will be bringing them back on a monthly basis in 2026. And without any further ado, the first book on this list is called Meticulous Jones and the Shadow Compass. This story is a middle-grade fantasy sequel, and I believe it comes out on January 6th, 2026, but I think that that's technically the British release date, since I'm pretty sure the author is British. I think that she lives in the UK with her wife. I'm not quite sure on that, but anyway, I think the British release date is in early January and the American release date is later in the month. So either way, I will be reading this book in January. I'm so excited to continue the series and figure out what happens next. I loved the first one so much, and I read it on a whim. Like, I had no expectations whatsoever, but I'm so excited to dive back into this world with these characters and the family dynamics and everything. So anyway, with that said, I'm so excited to read this book. The next book on this list is called The Ordinary and Extraordinary, Auden Greene. This story comes out January 13th, 2026, and it's a middle-grade fantasy that follows two main characters who switch bodies, except that one is now in a fantastical world that she thought was only fantastical and not actually real, and the other one, I believe, is now stuck in our world. This book sounds like it's going to be so good and so fantastic, mainly because I trust the author's reputation. I've read so many middle-grade fantasies by her in the past, so naturally I'm excited for her next one, especially since it's like pitched for fans of like The Wizard of Oz and Freaky Friday. That sounds like an interesting concept. So anyway, with that said, I'm so excited to read this book. It sounds like it's going to be so good and so awesome. And naturally, I love reading middle-grade fantasies, as we all know. So anyway, with that said, this book comes out January 13th, and I'm so excited to read it. The next book on this list also comes out on January 13th, 2026, and it's called Brady Mason's Perfect Fit. For those who don't know, this book is a middle-grade contemporary following a sapphic main character who basically finds out that her biological mother is a famous fashion editor, and she comes from a more like sporty background, so that's fun. I'm so excited to read this book because I've read multiple books before by this author, so again, I trust her reputation so much. And I've also talked about this book before in last week's video because it appeared on my list of my most anticipated queer middle grade 2026 new releases. So anyway, with that said, I apologize if my review is rather redundant, but I'm so excited to read this book. Nicole, historically, crafts such wonderful, awesome stories, brimming with like heart and hope, and with such great characters and storylines and queerness. So anyway, with that said, I know this book is going to be absolutely so awesome and so well done. So anyway, with that said, I'm really looking forward to it. The next book on this list is called A Wild Radiance. This story is a YA steampunk historical fantasy, I think, that follows a young, neurodivergent main character who is questioning the system who raised her, and it reimagines the War of the Currents, I think, with magic, which is really fascinating. And first of all, this concept alone reminds me of Fire Becomes Her, which was one of my favorite books a few years ago. Second of all, I've been told that this book talks about like polyamorous relationships and anti-capitalism, and it's for fans of Iron Widow and Arcane, and Arcane is definitely one of my favorite TV shows that I watched last year, so I'm so excited to read this book. Also, I've read a book previously by this author and it was so awesome, so with that said, I have super high expectations. I expect that this book is going to be absolutely so awesome and so well done. First of all, I love neurodivergent main characters set in a historical fiction setting, and I think this book is supposed to be set in like late 19th century, so that will be an interesting element as a neurodivergent person myself. But just in general, this concept sounds so interesting and so well done. So with that said, this book comes out January 20th. The next book on this list is called I Don't Wish You Well. This story is a YA thriller contemporary following a young black main character whom I believe is like an investigative journalist or something like that. And basically he's digging up a mystery of what happened 5 years ago when a serial killer like killed 4 people. And he's starting to suspect that what the town thinks happened isn't what actually happened. And I'm so excited to read this book because first of all, I love like the element of a mystery happening in a small town, given the way that small town communities often respond to marginalized people, if you know what I mean, in terms of like racism and homophobia. Second of all, I've always loved the plot or the storyline of a mystery that was wrapped up in the past, but it's starting to resurface in the present, if that makes any sense. Third of all, I've read multiple thrillers by this author before, so I trust his reputation. So anyway, with that said, I'm so excited to read this book. I think it's going to be so good and so awesome. So anyway, with that said, this book comes out January 20th, and I'm so excited to read it. The next book on this list is called Sabretooth. This story is a middle-grade contemporary following a transgender main character who accidentally loses control of a saber-toothed tiger that he digs up. So I'm excited to read this book because first of all, it comes out January 27th. But second of all, and I've mentioned this before, but Robin has become one of my favorite authors. I love all the books so much. So naturally, I know that this book is going to be absolutely so amazing and so well done. I've always loved their depiction in the past when it comes to queer main characters, especially transgender main characters. I think this book is going to be so amazing and so well done. I really trust their poetry. This book is also set in verse. Like, I'm so excited to read this book. I know it's going to be absolutely so amazing and so well done because, like, all the books in the past have been so awesome and so well done. Although I hardly ever talk about their debut. So besides that one, I've always enjoyed all of the books in the past. So anyway, with that said, I'm so excited to read this book. It's going to be so awesome. I just know it. Anyway, with that said, this book comes out January 27th. The next book on this list is called Sundown Girls. This story is a YA thriller following a young main character who's on a family vacation, and this family vacation turns into a nightmare because she starts to become haunted by these missing girls. And the fact that it's called Sundown Girls is so intriguing to me when it comes to the history of sundown towns and Black people in general. So anyway, this book comes out January 27th, and I'm so excited to read it because I love reading like thriller stories that parallel or draw attention to histories of marginalized people and really intertwine that into modern day, because obviously all of that is still relevant to modern day, if that makes any sense. Anyway, this is the only book on this list, I believe, where I've never read anything before by this author, so I'm really like going into it without any like reputation or anything. But with that said, I'm really excited to read this book. It sounds like it's going to be so good and so awesome. So anyway, with that said, this book comes out January 27th, and I'm so excited to read it. The last book on this list, and hopefully not the least, is called It Lurks the Night. This story comes out January 27th, 2026, and it follows a young main character who's trying to go on one last trip after high school graduation, I believe, with her best friend. But they have to take a detour on this magical, mysterious island that historically tourists ignore. And this book has Caribbean mythology infused into it, which is so fascinating and so well done because the author previously wrote, what was it called? It Waits in the Forest 2 years ago, which I absolutely loved so much. So with that said, I already have an established reputation to trust. Like, I love the idea of a local legend tied into magic or paranormal elements that the local people aren't quite sure whether or not it's actually real. I also love Caribbean mythology in general, especially from somebody who's half Jamaican. Like, I'm so excited to read this book. I know it's going to be absolutely so awesome and so well done. So anyway, with that said, this book comes out January 27th, and I'm so excited to read it. So in conclusion, all of my friends have been watching Heated Rivalry or Percy Jackson, and I am not like other girls because I am instead making my January TBR for 2026 before January has even started. I haven't really thought about Christmas or the fact that I'm going out of town in a week, I think. Anyway, can't really think about that. Instead, I'm thinking about what books I'll be reading in 2026. And I haven't even thought about how I'm going to film my 2025 reading wrap up. But anyway, all that to say, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that this video makes you excited for January 2026 new releases. Please let me know which new releases you're anticipating in January of next year. So anyway, in conclusion, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below the volleyball emoji if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye. See you next video.